guess I'll take another breath for me. That's a hard act to follow. And this talk is going to be so different. I'm going to start, well, there we are. I am going to talk about finding hidden communities through the medium of film. But first, in order to do that, I have to go way, way back to my early days. I've been in Las Vegas. I wasn't born here, but I've been here for over 60 years. And when I grew up in Las Vegas, downtown was the center of our cultural life. I went to ballet school down here. Our shopping was down on Fremont Street. There was a department store called Ronzoni's. I think it became Dillard's, actually, for anybody who lives on the West Coast. When I was too young to drive, my friends and I used to take the bus down here and hang out. And I actually attended Las Vegas High School when it was actually in Las Vegas, downtown. It's somewhere else now. I don't even know where. But and my old high school is now the School for the Performing Arts, which I'm actually very proud that they've done that, and it's an amazing facility. And our weekend was spent cruising Fremont Street. That was before there was the Fremont Street experience. And we would go up and down, and it was two-way, so it was great. You could talk to your neighbor while you were driving to the guy coming, the other way. And that was how we spent every weekend. So it was very interesting when Evelyn asked me to speak, and I started thinking about what downtown meant to me, just to start the whole idea of community. And I realized that a lot of my early experience and a lot of my early life was downtown Las Vegas. And you don't think about that, you forget, because over the years, obviously downtown has changed a lot. It was so wonderful for me, especially to be here today, and I must admit, I don't spend enough time here downtown, and I'm going to start spending more time, because what I saw today it came full circle for me, that it's now community again, and it's so exciting. But on to my background. So I came by my TV and film and advertising background quite honestly through my DNA. My mother, I don't know if any of you have been here for any length of time. My mom was actually a radio and TV host. She was a newspaper columnist. She's an amazing gourmet cook, and she was a food critic. I grew up working on her television show in the background, and by the way, never wanted to be in front of a camera. So this is, for me, like my worst nightmare is being in front of a camera. So an audience is okay, a camera, I like to be behind. So my mother was, and is still with us, but isn't active, but she really was a trendsetter and a pioneer in women in media. She was involved way before it was the thing to do where women were in media. So I came through it with a lot of support from my family. My father was in advertising, entertainment, and TV production. He was also an entertainment director at a lot of the hotels in town. He was the first entertainment director at Caesar's Palace when it opened. And through him, I took over his advertising agency when he became involved in television production. And the company that he worked for was called Trans-American Video. It was actually owned by Merv Griffin. I don't know if any of you are, some of you may be old enough to know who Merv Griffin is. The television company, it was a remote facilities company that did basically any show, any network show. This was before there was cable, and then finally on cable. Any network or cable show that came out of Las Vegas, the remote facilities were supplied by Trans-American Video. I think my father wrote the stagehands contract for television. So he was the one negotiating union contracts because nobody knew what to do as far as it was a whole new medium. So I grew up working with him doing that. As I say, my brother and I grew up in the business. This is my brother actually at If any of you are familiar with the Mint 400, which is an off-road race, this was the first one, which was in Laughlin, Nevada, which I don't think was even called the Mint 400 at that time. I think it was just the Laughlin 400. And you can see the quality of the equipment we used. And he had to be strapped in order to not fall out of the truck. So from the time I was in high school, I was working in television production. I was working in advertising and in film. When HBO, before HBO became what we all know HBO is today, it was just a nice little cable channel that did a lot of little specials. One of the ones that we did for HBO that I was associated with was with Joan Rivers, and it was called Joan Rivers from the Inside Out, and it was a special for HBO. It was really an interesting show. Now they've got a whole series called Inside Out, which I don't think they remember that we actually started that. I'm sure they wouldn't, but hopefully they have that somewhere in the vault. One of the things I did that most people probably can't say they did is I directed Orson Welles. It was for a gaming tape. We did two, actually. We did one for Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and for what at that point it was closed-circuit television to the rooms, and you could learn how to gamble in your room by watching these tapes. This one in particular we did when the Boardwalk Regency in Atlantic City was opening. We had to do it before the casino officially opened, or no cameras were allowed once it was open. So I had the pleasure of working there before it was open and directing Orson Welles in a gaming tape. And at that time, it was a gaming video as opposed to what you all know as video gaming now. We didn't know, that didn't exist. So definitely a difference. As Evelyn mentioned, in the early 90s, my husband and I got involved with and then eventually took over the Cinevegas Film Festival brand. One of our fun events, we had, I don't know if any of you got to go to Cinevegas. I know some of you did. Francisco, you were there. And the good news is now we have the Las Vegas Film Festival. We've been on hiatus for many years, but there's a chance that through Milo, maybe we'll combine efforts. We don't know. But that was a very wonderful, wonderful experience for us. We met wonderful people. We had the great Dennis Hopper was the chairman of our advisory board, and we had some good times and some good films. And then, as you've already heard, we were also partners in a production company. But forget about me now from that standpoint. I now want to talk about community and the fact that I was raised in a family that talked about community all the time and how important it is to be a part of your community. I'd like to take full credit for the name Greenspun, but it's actually my husband's name. But I married into a family that also believed very strongly in community, so it was a good match. So I had to throw in my showgirl picture. How many people have a picture of themselves with showgirls when they're little? So there aren't many towns you can do that. So for me, when I went to school, from high school through college, I was involved in the arts. I wanted to be an artist. I did everything from making jewelry to ceramics to painting to basically everything. I was a fine arts major in college. I actually ended up getting my degree in communication study, but I went from fine arts to commercial art to communication studies. So for me, finding the arts community felt right as I got older. I know it's probably hard to believe, but I really am very shy, and at certain points in my life was painfully shy. And yet the arts gave me an outlet to get over that. So the arts community became my creative community. So how did that lead me to make a documentary about a young lady with Crohn's disease? Maybe that's not so creative. It's actually incredibly creative, and it brought me full circle back to everything that I loved, being in the television and movie and arts community. So I want to tell you a little bit about the film, if I can get this to change. So it really is all about community. My friend Carrie Marshall and her daughter Dana, I've known since before Dana was born. Dana's now 26. She's the subject of the documentary. It started with a lunch I was having with my friend Carrie about Dana, who I hadn't seen for quite a while. Dana, we all knew, all of the friends of the family knew that Dana had Crohn's disease, and she'd been diagnosed at a very, very young age, which is unusual. She was diagnosed at the age of 4. And we all knew from going to dinner with Carrie and her ex-husband that we could be at a party, we could be at dinner, and all of a sudden they'd get a phone call and they were off. They had to leave. And we never really understood what all that meant, but we knew that Dana was sick and that it wasn't good. Through the years, Dana was very public and very visible until she reached the age of 17, 18. And then all of a sudden, Dana kind of disappeared. But I would keep up with what was happening with Dana through her mother. We would have lunches, once every few months, and my first question to her was always, "How's Dana?" And she would, tell me a little bit, but the family was very, very closed about what was happening with Dana. So even though all of us that knew the family thought we knew a lot about what was happening with Dana and what the disease was that she had, I found out that I knew nothing. I was at lunch with Carrie in November of 2013, and I said to her, "How's Dana?" And she said to me, "I just want someone to walk around with a camera behind that kid so people know what she goes through every single day of her life, because they won't believe it." And I, having a large mouth at certain times, said, "Well, we can do that." She said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, let's make a documentary about her." Now, had I ever made a documentary before? No. Have I been in the film business? Have I television? Yes. That's my background. I understand how to do it. I hadn't done it. I know about documentaries. I love documentaries. We show documentaries at Cine Vegas. I was familiar with documentary filmmakers. But it took, again, stupidity. Where's Erica? Thank you for that. That was one of those jump and think later. And she said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Sure, let's do it. Let's make a documentary." It took about 2 weeks to convince Dana, but then once she was in, she was all in. It took a little bit of time for me to realize that they don't use videotape anymore to make movies, Francisco. So that when I refer to the dinosaur goes digital, I am very serious. When I first called the film crew, this film was mostly shot in Cleveland, at the Cleveland Clinic, and when I first called and got in touch with the film crew that ended up being the most incredible group in Cleveland, they're wonderful people in Las Vegas, and I said, "I want to, making this documentary, I need you to help. And then I'd like to end up with a DVD with window burn on it." And the guy almost hung up on me because it was like, "What century are you from? We don't do that." So there was a bit of a learning curve, and I had to do it fast because Dana didn't want to go with any of our production schedules, not on purpose, but when you're dealing with someone with a chronic illness, it's easy to say, "Oh, let's take 6 weeks and plan this out." And then 2 weeks later, I get a call from Carrie saying, "Dana's on her way to Cleveland Clinic. We have to go now." So there we were. So I returned very quickly and literally by the seat of my pants to my creative community in television and in film. And in the process, I discovered a really amazing hidden community. There's some facts and figures about IBD. Crohn's disease is one of the diseases of IBD. It's inflammatory bowel disease. This is a disease that people don't talk about. They just don't talk about. Patients don't talk about it. Families don't talk about it. But there's a community there, and they're communicating somehow, and there are a lot of them out there. But what's happening? How do you bring them together? How do you let them talk to each other? How do you do something that's meaningful to that community? It turned out that, first of all, they shy away from social interaction, from physical social interaction, because the disease itself, you don't look at someone with Crohn's disease and say, oh, you have Crohn's disease. It's a hidden disease. You don't see it. You don't know. And it's, I'm sorry, but I have to say it, it's a shit disease. And that's what it's about. It has to do with really horrific problems with your bowels and other parts of your body. So it is a very, very tough situation for patients of Crohn's to have a lot of social interaction. So how do they communicate? We found that through online support, through websites, through just a lot of online social interaction, that was where the support system was. So for them, it was a very liberating thing that they could go to websites, get answers to questions, talk with other patients. Dana tells us that, you know, the best information that she ever gets is from other patients who've gone through the same thing that she's going through. So how do we take that, show that in a film, and help other patients and other people with chronic diseases? It didn't have to be Crohn's at this point. So we proceeded under the assumption that we were going to try and show as much as we could, as much as Dana would allow us. Because it's a little invasive having someone go with you when you're in the hospital and stick a camera in your face and talk about a disease that you haven't talked about for the first 25 years of your life and your family hasn't talked about in public. And now we're going to make a movie about you, and we're going to show it to everybody that we can. So there were some pitfalls about that because, you know, when is too much, you know, information too much information? And we had to be very careful with that, not to put Dana in a situation where where we embarrassed her or where she felt vulnerable. And yet, some of you, I think, saw the film today. She allowed us to show her vulnerability to a point that is really amazing. I mean, she's my hero. But there is a total loss of anonymity. This kid can't hide out anymore. She's living in Cleveland right now because she's waiting for a small bowel transplant, which is the next step for her in order to hopefully have a normal life. And she went to the gas station the other day, and we were at the Cleveland Film Festival, and we had a lot of publicity. We had television stories, we had newspaper stories, we had all kinds of things. And she went to the gas station and she got out of her car and someone said, "Are you that ostomy girl?" Well, she was so shocked she didn't even know how to answer. And that's when she really realized that she had lost her anonymity. So it's a little tough because it did take her out of her comfort zone. But the big plus about that is now people, through the film, we've been to five film festivals. We work with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America. We're going to be doing awareness screenings with them around the country. And through that, through the awareness, through this new community network, we hope that the film will help raise not only the understanding of this disease and other chronic diseases, but specifically Crohn's, which then leads to raising dollars, which then leads to more research and hopefully a cure. So what is the impact of breaking out of the hidden community? Discovering other communities with parallel issues. We have had so many people that have other diseases or have children with other diseases that have said to us, okay, my child doesn't have Crohn's, but I understand exactly what you're talking about, the isolation, everything that goes with it. And this is a new way of opening up channels of communication. So through this film, we have not only discovered the hidden community of Crohn's, but we have now opened up a channel for a lot of other people to be more outspoken with their ailments. These are hidden diseases. They are not things that you look at someone and say, you have such and such, you have such and such. And I know I've run out of time, so this is what happens when I get started. But coming full circle to this, starting with my creative days, in my early days in Las Vegas, to doing this documentary has been so rewarding and so wonderful. I hope you will all get a chance to see it. We have some other means of distribution that we're working on. So I want to thank you for having me here. I know I ran over, I'm sorry. And I hope I didn't bore you. Thanks.